Hello and welcome to BBC World News. Fierce fighting between Afghan government forces and the Taliban is continuing in the southern city of Lashkargah, the capital of Helmand province. There are reports of an intense battle close to the police headquarters, and dozens of families have fled their homes. It's very hard to get footage from the city, but these pictures were sent to us by local residents showing the extent of the damage. The Afghan army is urging civilians to leave Lashkargah ahead of a major offensive against the Taliban. Meanwhile, the Taliban have now claimed responsibility for a car bomb and gun attack in a high-security district in Kabul. Militants were apparently targeting the home of the acting defense minister, who wasn't there at the time of the attack, which killed at least 8 people. Our correspondent Secundra Kamani is in Kabul. He told us more about this latest bombing.
Yeah, so this was an attack that happened last night in a central area of the city. It began with a car bomb that exploded outside the gates of the defense minister's home. Then 4 attackers, 4 gunmen, fought their way inside the home, engaged in an hours-long battle with security forces. The defense minister, as you say, was not there at the time. His family was safely evacuated. Now, of course, this is raising concerns about the militants' ability to strike really at the center of the government. Kabul, whilst over the years it's seen, unfortunately, huge numbers of suicide bombings, in recent months, really for the last year, it's seen less of these kind of big complex attacks suspected to be carried out by the Taliban. Many fear this is yet another escalation in the violence. First, we saw the Taliban taking over more rural areas. Then we saw them launching assaults on provincial capitals. Now we've had this attack right at the center of the government. But one thing to note that's more positive for the Afghan security forces, last night also saw ordinary residents in Kabul, in other cities across the country, coming out onto their rooftops, their balconies, chanting Allahu Akbar, God is great, in support of the security forces, in defiance of the Taliban, celebrating the resistance that the Afghan security forces has been putting up against the Taliban. That's going to be a key boost to the morale of the security forces who are fighting the Taliban on a number of fronts at the moment.
Secundra Kamani reporting there from Kabul. And Afghan MP Fawzi Kufi is the first woman Deputy Speaker of Parliament in Afghanistan and a member of the Afghan government peace negotiation team that is in discussions with the Taliban in Doha. Her sister's house was damaged in Tuesday's blast.
Just across the minister's house, there are also it's a residential area. People are living there, including my sister, whose house was damaged. But we are very lucky because no major injury. One of her security was injured, and her son. If you look at the house and the destruction in the area, not only to the minister's house, but to the local, people and to the small business owners, it's huge destruction. Last night was terrible. I could see a lot of people in front of the emergency hospital waiting for their loved ones' recovery.
That was Afghan MP Fawzi Kufi speaking to me there a little earlier. Well, Isabel Musa Carlson is the head of office for the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs in Afghanistan. She joins us live from Kabul now. Isabel, thank you very much for joining us. You have a number of field workers who are out working at the moment in places like Helmand and Kandahar. We are hearing about alleged atrocities committed by the Taliban on the ground. What are your staff and colleagues telling you?
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon. What our teams are saying is that there are indeed a lot of reports of increased civilian casualties, destruction, damages at civilian houses, shop, hospital, and other key civilian infrastructure. And the UN and the humanitarian partners are very deeply concerned about the safety and protection of the people in Lashkargah. And in other locations as well, where tens of thousands of people are trapped by fighting.
They are, as you say, trapped in places like Lashkargah. Yesterday we spoke to General Sami Sadat, who was calling on civilians to leave the area. Are you concerned, though, that given the heavy fighting and given the pressure that the Taliban are putting on civilians, that will prove to be virtually impossible?
During the fighting, it will be impossible. We see that civilian populations are trapped between the front lines, definitely, but we also see a lot of displacement happening in all Afghanistan at this stage. And our teams in the field are meeting this displaced population and are ensuring that emergency aid is available for them.
Is the Taliban giving you safe passage and access to civilians who are in need of aid and assistance?
As humanitarians, we are negotiating access as necessary to ensure that we can bring the support required to the most vulnerable population. The humanitarian community calls up all parties to protect civilian and civilian infrastructure. We see a lot of schools that are being destroyed, a lot of water plants, hospitals, which are essential. We see that access to care and healthcare is extremely difficult. And we really need to see the international humanitarian law being upheld in those circumstances.
Well,
and we negotiate for principal humanitarian access.
We're also hearing reports of bodies being left in the streets and roads in places like Spinboldak in Kandahar, as well as in Lashkargah. Is that what your colleagues are seeing as well? And we're hearing reports about revenge attacks.
We're hearing the same reports, and for us, what is essential is that we continue providing the necessary support to the population.
So you are currently in negotiations and talks with the Taliban.
We're negotiating for access, and in line with the international humanitarian law, and to ensure that the UN and our UN partners can remain present in the south to assess the needs. And for example, we had an interagency response to on the 1st of August in Kandahar for over 2,000 people with food, relief items, water, sanitation, hygiene, and so on. So we can still provide support to the population in those areas.
Of course, these were people and populations that were in dire straits even before the fighting began. There was a drought, and of course they were suffering because of COVID as well.
Yeah, here in Afghanistan, the situation is a deadly combination of conflict, drought, and COVID. We see 30% of the population is facing crisis level of food insecurity. More than 50% of the children under 5 may face severe acute malnutrition. I recently visited the Kandahar hospital, and there the head of pediatrics was telling me that in the last 6 months, the first 6 months of the year, he saw a doubling of the children admitted in the acute malnutrition ward. And in fact, what I could witness is that we had several children per bed, really in very dire situations.
Isabel, thank you very much for joining us here on the program.
Thank you very much. Bye.